and welcome in to another episode of Irrational Confidence. My name is Micah. I am joined, as always, by my fellow hosts and friends, Lino and Caelan. As you can tell by the title, we have the gargantuan task of previewing the Western Conference for this episode. This conference, if you're an NBA fan, you already know it is going to be a gauntlet for these teams to try and rack up even a decent amount of wins. There's so much talent. It's going to be very fun to get into. Normally, we'll start the show with some news and notes, but really, there's not too much noteworthy things happening in the NBA. So, we're going to kind of get right into the preview. And we're going to start just like we do at the East at the very top of the Western Conference. And for me, the very top was probably the easiest one to rank. I went pretty chalk with it. I'm excited to hear Lino and Caelan's thoughts. But for the number one projected seed in the Western Conference, I went with the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder were the number one seed last year, and they added two players for without giving up very much. Those obviously being Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein. I think they'll help the team a lot. I think their young guys will get better. It's hard not to project them to be close to like 60 wins, which is especially impressive again with how good this conference is. So, Caelan, I'll throw it to you first. As far as the Thunder, what are you thinking of them for this season, and what will you be looking for in the first couple weeks of the season?
So I definitely expect this team to be pretty dominant from start to finish. This roster it's not just a team that's full of talent. It's a nearly perfectly constructed roster. They really just have everything that you could want. They have plenty of ball handling and shooting and passing, and they have length, and they have defense and rim protection, and then they have depth. And the addition of Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein, two incredible pickups over the offseason that's really going to help them, one, shore up their depth, and two, it's going to give them the ability to play with different variety. Last year, in they were dominant in playing in their one singular way, but this year they're going to have the option to switch it up and go two bigs or space it out and put Chad at the center. So that's going to help them out a lot. So I definitely see them winning more games than they won last year. What do you think, Lee?
Yeah, I'm on the same page with both of you. I thought the pickups this season were unique in the sense that obviously they make this team better, but they also specifically allow OKC Thunder's main two players to play their best brand of basketball. I think bringing in Alex Caruso allows SGA to really unlock his full spectrum of abilities, and really even be able to, on the other end, focus in on being able to score more, not having so much of the load when it comes to setting up and setting the table for other players. Obviously, SGA is great at those things, and that's a part of his game. But he can really be, honestly, if he wanted to be, and if the moment called for it, he could be a pure scorer on this team with a player like Alex Caruso next to him, helping other guys get set up. And the same thing goes for Chet. Obviously, he's a great defensive player, a great big, but having someone like Hartenstein next to him or coming off the bench really allows him to focus on his game, either on the offensive end or at the point of attack, or crashing the boards. Like, he doesn't have to do everything out there on his side of the court, and so that really allows him to do more. And so I thought those were two really strategic pickups. I think this team is obviously the best team in the West. To me, I think they are going to win even more games than they did last year. And I think we're going to see a situation much like we saw with the Celtics, where it will actually come off as too easy, where we'll really wonder if they've actually faced anybody. Because while the rest of the teams are going to be stuck in a gauntlet, I think OKC is going to thrive. And even through the playoffs, people are going to be like, has this team actually faced anybody yet? And then we get to the finals and it'll be like, okay, yeah, this team is actually just great. And they make everything look easy. Much like the Celtics did once they picked up Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. That team just became immediately a really dominant team, and it's structured much like this one. So I'm really excited for the Thunder. I think they're going to have an incredible season, and not to even mention players like J-Dubs and things of that nature. But Micah, did you have any other thoughts on the Thunder and kind of what you see for them moving forward?
Yeah, you guys hit on a lot of it. I think I saw this great tweet from Justin Giovanni, I believe it's pronounced, or Giovanni on Twitter. He was making the point that replacing Josh Giddey and Jalen Williams, big Jalen Williams, with Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein in the rotation is almost like adding another star player to take 2 points of your depth that you could argue were kind of weak spots and replace them with guys that are high caliber players at their specific position. They didn't add a third star or a fourth star, however you want to look at it, but they really shored up the rest of their rotation. And to me, they remind me almost like their Boston West, because they really have like six starters. I think especially in the playoffs, they'll be able to be so versatile. If they're playing bigger teams, they can slide Chet to the four. If they want to switch more, they can play Chet at the five and have Hartenstein off the bench. So yeah, just super excited to see this team. Lino, I loved your point about the defensive responsibilities. Last season, J-Dub was one of their two stoppers. Every season, or every game rather, it was Dort on the best perimeter player and J-Dub on the second best perimeter player. And in the playoffs, that's taxing. Now Caruso has that assignment, and we could see even more from Jalen Williams and Shea, which the only thing they lost with Giddey was a little creation. They don't have a lot of ball handlers now, so I think that point's great that with J-Dub not having as much defensive responsibilities, he'll hopefully have more energy to be the playmaker we've seen him be pretty consistently so far. So yeah, I think the Thunder is probably the easiest one. So now it gets a little difficult. I'm gonna go ahead and say, so how I usually do this is I kind of just off the top of my head go through my tiers, rank everybody, and then I start doing my write ups on them. And as I look at the depth chart, look at different stats from last season, I'll reorder them. And this exercise was the most I've reordered as I've gone through it. And I think that just speaks to how close all these teams are. But my next tier is three teams. And at the top of it, mostly by default, I went with the Denver Nuggets. My thought process here is they have the best player. He's almost always available. He's very healthy. He plays a lot. And that was my tiebreaker, because as we'll discuss, the other teams in this tier are very good. Denver, I think your main concerns are going to be 3-point volume. They were, I believe, dead last in 3-point volume last year, or at least frequency of shots from three. And they lose KCP, who, while he didn't take a ton of threes, probably took more than Christian Braun is going to this year in his place. I do think Christian Braun's probably a slight defensive upgrade on KCP. I think he had lost a little bit of a step on that side of the ball, but obviously it's going to hurt the spacing. They also lose their depth. Christian Braun was one of their better bench pieces, and now he's in the starting lineups. Everyone else is elevated. So they're going to be an interesting team to watch. I want to know what you guys think. Lino, I'll throw it to you first on this one. For Denver, what do you think of them at this spot? They won 57 games last year. Do you think they'll win more or less? And then just early in the season, what do you be looking for from the Nuggets?
Yeah, I could definitely understand optimism and simple, well, not simple, but like a very straightforward philosophy of, this team has the best player, so they should still be really good. And we've seen time and time again that heliocentric or ball really works when you have the best player. Like, you can really expect that player to drag a team to relevancy and to home court advantage. And so I could see that optimism with the Nuggets, but I don't really see much else to be optimistic about there. I think Caelan brought this up last episode when we were talking about, I think Joel Embiid. We were discussing, some people also subscribe to the idea that Olympic performances matter when it comes to the next season. And, certain players, when they have good performances, that can bode well for them. And when they have poor performances, that could be an omen. And I don't think there's any worse omen than the performance that Jamal Murray had in the Olympics last year. So I'm really concerned about his play going into the season. And I feel bad because I think from a narrative standpoint, he's kind of stuck in a corner where if he does bad, then, obviously we could tell from the very bad Olympic run he had. But then if he does well, it's like, okay, so you're kind of a Jokic merchant. Like you really need this guy to set up your career, which I guess isn't terrible to depend on the best player in the world. But he's kind of stuck in this weird narrative circle where I don't know if there's a way for him to come out of it looking greatly unless, he's able to perform well in a way that seems to be separate from his sharing the court with Nikola Jokic. I think the other thing that I feel bad about is that I'm a big Russ fan from a personal standpoint. From a basketball standpoint, I don't know that he's really made a team better since he joined it in a while. I think that Clippers team was pretty good with him on it. I don't know if it had too much to do with him being on that team. And so I'm really thinking there's a lot of question marks around that. And so ultimately, I just think this team wins less games, and I just don't think they can maintain staying in that top 2 or 3 seeds going into the season, especially as teams around them start to improve and some of the younger players really start to, make a name for themselves in the West. But we'll see what happens. Obviously, people have doubted the Nuggets a lot since they really started going on this run, and they continue to prove people wrong. So we'll see if this year they can keep that up. But Caelan, what are you thinking about the Nuggets so far?
Yeah, I thought a lot about this team, and I think that it's easy to overthink, losing KCP and replacing that spot with Westbrook and, the Jamal Murray thing. And, it's kind of easy to overthink that. And I'm not going to go that way. I think they're still going to be pretty dominant. I think they're going to be pretty tough to beat throughout the season. I think we can expect the same things from Jokic. I think he's going to be playing at an MVP level. I think he's just as polished as ever. He's great. Excuse me. He's a great player, obviously. I think Jamal Murray's going to be fine. I think it was an interesting point you made, Lino, about maybe he sort of needs Jokic to kind of help set him up. Although he did, he didn't perform too well in the playoffs either. So there is that point, but I think that overall he's going to be fine. At least in a regular season
Mm-hmm.
context, they're going to be a really tough team to beat. They know how to play. So returning all the same players, except for obviously KCP. So I think that's going to be helpful. They still have one of the best coaches in basketball, in my opinion, in Coach Malone. I think he's really good. So maybe you can say less, but I don't know. I think there's even though that maybe they take a small step back, I think there are some teams in the West that also take a step back. The Clippers, obviously are not as good,
Mm-hmm.
and some other teams. So I actually might
Yeah.
lean more, to be honest. They won 57 games last year. I say this year they win, 58, 59 games.
Yeah. And I guess I should also say that when I say I think they're going to win less games, I don't think they drop down to like 45 wins or something. I just didn't know if they'd be able to make it to 57. But you make a lot of good points there. And I think you're right. Tenure is something that they have such a really strong foundation in. And that's something that can carry teams to playoff success, especially at least regular season success, almost always. Like if you can just put together the same team that's solid, if not, anchored by the best player in the league, that can get you pretty far year to year. So I don't think I'm too upset about that. This depth, though, as I look at it, what do you guys think about this bench? Like, do you feel like is Jokic going to have to play like 42 minutes a game, or are we, going to let the 45-year-old DeAndre Jordan or PJ Hall, get to play more than 5 minutes?
Yeah, it's a good question because they don't like to go to the Aaron Gordon at the 5 lineup in the
Mm-hmm.
regular season. That's something they like to save. So yeah, they'll have to be careful. The center rotation, I feel like, is always a question mark with Denver. And, it might be the season they have to lean more on Aaron Gordon. And then the bench in general, I have in my notes one of Peyton Watson or Julian Strother probably needs to become like a solid rotation player
That
this
was my
season.
next question was like, okay, the next position I wanted to talk about was that shooting guard. Like
Hmm.
it's question marks abound. And they could
Right.
be answered with really positive answers this season, but
Hmm.
I didn't really get to see much tape on Watson or Strother last year. And so I don't know if they're ready or able to make that playoff leap yet.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think both have shown flashes. It's certainly a lack of consistency has been there, but the archetype for both you really like with how they'd fit alongside this team. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I try not to get too caught up into like narratives and off court stuff, but I do think Russ could really help this team from an energy standpoint. I
Yeah.
I feel like Denver the last couple seasons post championship has kind of just been in the mud, going through the motions. And while the cohesion is nice that you referenced, I do feel like it's kind of like, okay, it's the same group, it's the same coach, we're running the same stuff. So Russ just being such a high energy kind of basketball maniac, I do feel like could raise the floor of some of these bench units. I feel like
Mhm. Yeah.
Strother and Watson running alongside him in transition. I feel like that could help. Two notes I had. Denver was dead last in 3-point frequency last year. That seems like something, if they emphasize it, they could get up. That's kind of low hanging fruit. And then they were second to last in points added in transition. So those are two things that, like, in theory, are pretty low hanging fruit. They could really try and just clean those up. And who knows, it might be just enough to kind of keep them in that 57
Yeah.
win range.
My main question is, who are you asking to take more of those threes?
Yeah, that.
Well,
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, I mean, I think it'll be shot diet changes. So like
Mhm.
Jamal Murray, you got to cut out the mid range. Like if you're gonna shoot a pull up on a possession, you got to be behind the line. Same thing with MPJ, dunks and threes only. Jokic, he had a down season from three last year. It seems like it's a pendulum. He'll swing back and shoot 40% this year. Something like that would help. But with this team, I think volume is almost as important as accuracy. So encouraging Christian Brown to take at least as many as KCP did last year.
Mhm.
Strother is a good shooter if you can bring along the other parts of his game to hopefully contribute in that way. And hopefully just kind of fixing it by committee would be my best suggestion.
Yeah, the 3-point shooting definitely is a concern. I'm I'm not sure if they're going to just um force shooting more. To be honest, I feel like I would expect them almost to just continue to lean on what they do well. And to be honest, I don't dislike the mid range jumpers for this team. I really don't. I guess without KCP, because he did shoot some of those off the 2-man game with Jokic, but. I just feel like that's kind of one of their little superpowers that they can unlock. It's an easy play. So I know the 3-point shooting is an issue. I know Russ is an issue. I just want to say people always want to try to believe in Russ. Russ is not a good player, guys. He stinks.
What about the like first Clippers run version of Russ? Do you think that's still in him, or you think even that is gone at this point?
um, I I think the Clippers were a much better situation for him. I mean, listen, I do believe in Coach Malone similarly to how I think Ty Lue is of that same ilk. So maybe Coach Malone can figure something out that I'm not seeing, but I just don't know how this fits, especially when they don't have like the Clippers had a lot of shooting, and this team doesn't really have the shooting. Does Russ fit better? Playing without Jokic? Does he fit better with Jokic when we know he's not a good off ball player? So I just don't see how that works. But still confident that Jokic will churn out wins as always.
That's fair. That's definitely fair. Well, we can move on to the next team. Again, I just want to reiterate this tier was very tough. But for me, at number three, I went with the Dallas Mavericks. So the
Whoa.
Mavs had a strong season last year, 50 wins. They were the 5 seed. It's well noted that post trade deadline, they really surged defensively after acquiring Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington. And I think a lot of people are projecting that that second half run we saw from the Mavs that obviously led them all the way to the finals will be the team we see this year. I'm not as confident in that. I think there are some things they'll have to figure out with the players they lost and gained. Just for a quick recap, if anyone missed it, Josh Green and Derrick Jones Jr. both departed, two of their better perimeter defenders, and essentially were replaced by Klay Thompson and Najee Marshall. Najee Marshall, I think, is a good defender. Klay Thompson, we'll see what he can still provide on that end. But those players bring other things that could benefit the Mavs. So, Caelan, I'll throw it to you first on Dallas. What are you looking for from the Mavericks this year, and how are you projecting that this season is going to look like for them?
Yeah, so I still think that they're going to be a very good team. They do have the second best player in the world in Luka Doncic, so that's going to account for a lot of wins in and of itself. I like Kyrie Irving next to him. I think that losing those defensive pieces, I think you said it, Micah. It's going to be something to figure out. So I think that the start that the Mavericks have may not exactly be what Mavericks fans are expecting, considering the season that they just had. But I do think that they're going to figure it out at some point, and they are going to be a team that's going to be a factor in the playoffs. So they're going to be a very good team. We're going to see what Klay Thompson does. I'm not super high on Klay Thompson, but there are a lot of smart basketball people who think he's going to do well, and he is going to get some good looks, and he is going to be asked to do less than he was asked to do in Golden State, which is good, but defensively, there are definitely going to be some things to work out because playing those three guys together is going to be a difficult look. So we're going to see how Derek Lively progresses another season. He should be an improved player. Some do some pretty impressive things last year, so I'm definitely going to be looking forward to see how he improves. I think he can help the team if he gets even better. But we will see. I think how many games did they win last year? I'm sorry,
50.
they won 50 games. Oh, okay. I'll definitely say they won more than that for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm on the same boat. I think they win more games moving into the next year just from the strength of tenure and being able to bring most of this roster back, at least most of the more important pieces of this roster back into another season. I think that Klay Thompson's an interesting ad. I don't think it moves the needle too much, really, one way or the other. I think it's based on who they're replacing in that guard rotation. I think it's kind of maybe slightly better if we get, the optimism at that position. I think is slightly better with a Hall of Fame player than it is the players they had there previously, like Tim Hardaway Jr. I think Spencer Dinwiddie is a really interesting add to this roster. Him coming back to the Mavericks. He had a solid season with them before when he was being asked to do way more than I think he will be in this new role. I think he finished out relatively strong from efficiency standpoint, from three at least. From the floor, it looks like he shot like 39% from the floor, but 38% from three, which is he's probably just out there shooting a bunch of catch and shoot threes, which isn't terrible. Like 38% is solid, probably better than what Tim Hardaway Jr. was giving. I think this is going to depend on the young players continuing to develop. We'll see if Derek Lively either takes another step or has what could be a very natural sophomore slump as the league starts to adjust to him, similar to what we saw in players who really shined in their rookie year, like Tyler Hero, and others who took a bit of a step back but didn't mean anything necessarily for their career. Like they could actually continue to advance, but once the league sees you and acknowledges you, that comes with its own challenges. And I think Derek Lively's game is not the hardest game to adjust to, and so I think coaches are going to game plan for that going into this next season. So we'll see how he does. Hopefully, Omax will do something helpful because that would help them a lot if he showed up in a way that could be put on the floor in the real season. So
No, it's
I
going to
feel
be a lot
good
of
about the
Dwight Powell,
Mavs.
baby.
Yeah, and that's some where the deficiencies lie here is that this team is still relying on players like Dwight Powell, and their stars are still relatively, prone to missing games at times. So we'll see if they can really develop the consistency that they need throughout the regular season to get to the third seed. But it's where I had them too. I'm pretty optimistic about Luka as a player and his continued development. I think he's going to have another incredible season moving forward. And I do like the retool around the core of this team. So, yeah, Micah, did you have any other thoughts on the Mavs?
My only other thought is guard defense. I'm just kind of
Mm-hmm.
concerned with that unit where they started Derek Jones Jr. and PJ Washington last year. I just always felt comfortable that they were going to have at least a decent matchup on the other team's two best players. And it's something that makes me wonder how long Klay Thompson will be starting for this team. If he can hold it defensively, if he's revitalized, that's great. But if he's not, I think you might have to have some tough conversations. Maybe they just close with Najee Marshall and just, explain to Clay that they just need more defense, but he can keep starting. But the Warriors, I believe they were 4.5 points worse per 100 possessions on defense last year with Clay on the court, which that's like a big number. Then they were like zero point 0.1 better on offense. So, and I think that's kind of where we're all at with Clay now, is like the shooting is not quite at the level it used to be. The offense in general isn't, and the defense has slipped so much that he's not consistently a positive impact player. So I'll be watching that. He'll definitely be, on a revenge tour. He'll want to prove everybody wrong. The Warriors made a mistake, that whole deal. But I'm assuming, going to be asked to be guard the best, going to be asked to defend the best guard on the other team night to night. Because I don't think they're going to make Kyrie do that. PJ Washington's going to have to get the best wing. So then it's like, okay, PJ Washington's on Jalen Williams. Clay, you're on Shea. Like it just, I don't mean Shea's like, obviously no one can guard Shea, but just night to night, like Clay, you're on De'Aaron Fox. You're
Yeah.
on, like, you just go through the West and it's like, gosh, this is going to be tough. So I'll be watching that for sure, just to see if the defense can hold up, because that was really the biggest part of their run last year, was the defense really flipped. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, Dallas is definitely going to be interesting to see. And now we're to my final team in this tier, and that is the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Minnesota Timberwolves made a big trade just recently, acquiring Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo and trading out Karl Anthony Towns, which to me made this a little more fun to kind of think about. They're not running back the exact same group. We kind of have to project how these new pieces will fit and how their impact on the team will happen. So I'm pretty optimistic they'll be at a similar level to where they were last year. Last year, they won 56 games. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say maybe 53, 54, slightly less, but still a solid home court team in the playoffs in the Western Conference, which is quite an accomplishment. But I'm excited to hear what you guys think. Caelan, I'll throw it to you first on this one. What do you think about the Wolves? What are some of your biggest questions for them going into this season?
I love them. I think they're going to be awesome this year, guys. I think I understand the hesitation regarding the Julius Randle fit, but from an optimistic standpoint, I think this is a perfect place for him to land from an attitude perspective. I think Anthony Edwards is a perfect player to play next to when you have a chip on your shoulder and you really just need somebody that's rooting for you. Like, I feel like any person who needs their career turned around can go play with Anthony Edwards, and he's going to bring the best out of you just from like an environment standpoint. I really appreciated what I saw from Anthony Edwards when it came to really bigging up his teammates, and those guys coming out of New York, when they probably really didn't want to leave, couldn't have landed somewhere, obviously, outside of a destination they wanted to go, better than the Minnesota Timberwolves. This is a great team that has a great system and a great coach that's, ready to win more basketball games. And they're led by a guy who really meets people where they're at. Anthony Edwards is a really goofy guy, but one thing is for certain, like, whatever you're into, he's into that for you. So, like, I think him and Kat probably couldn't be more different people. And yeah, I think, Kat did a lot, I think, to make that relationship work, and, did take a step back as the guy on that team to make space for Ant. But I do think Ant made him feel very comfortable in that space. And I think he can do the same thing for Julius Randle. And I think a happy Julius Randle can be a productive one. And I think Dante DiVincenzo is an incredible add to this team. When you take that into account, that Naz Reid is going to get more minutes moving forward, regardless of if Julius Randle's here or not, I think he is going to get more minutes. And Jaden McDaniels taking another step in the right direction. Even Ant, his development path is not over. I think he has a lot of room to grow, and I think he's going to grow. And I think this team can still be very dominant. I am sad for Kat. I know he really did not want to leave Minnesota, but I do, have an appreciation for a front office that is really, proactive in decision making. And I think it's better to be a little bit early on a move than to be too late. And with the Cats contract and the way things were going to be, there wasn't going to be many situations where this team could stick together very long. And I don't think they saw it being a situation where the team they had can surpass the teams in front of them. So I appreciate them trying something. I thought they brought in some pretty good talent, and I'm excited to see how it all plays out moving forward. What did you think about the Wolves, and kind of what was your, lasting thoughts with their path forward, Micah?
Yeah, it's funny when the trade initially happened. I was like, man, just a money move. They're making themselves worse just to get off Town's contract. And the more I've thought about it, I'm not sure they got any worse. I think they could be pretty similar. Towns, a lot of his value on offense comes from being a five, and in New York we'll see that. But for Minnesota, he was playing the four, and a lot of the stuff he does just isn't as valuable for if you're a power forward. You know, his shooting is so unique for a center. It's probably only a little better than average for a four. So I think, Randall hurts the spacing. He's not a great shooter, but he gives you that creation boost. And then DiVincenzo, I mean, they needed that shooting. And honestly, like, their bench is sick now. Like, DiVincenzo, obviously Nas, reigning six man of the year. You still have Nikhil Alexander Walker. If Rob Dillingham, gets going, maybe the second half of the year, can figure some stuff out, that's some added shot creation. I think Edwards will get better. So yeah, they won a ton of games last year. 56 is a high number in the West. So from me, it's definitely not a slight saying I think it'll be less games. That'll just be tough for anyone to get to. But I think the Wolves are going to be legit. I think if people were like how I was early on and were kind of like dismissing what they did, I think they might really turn some heads once they get rolling. So I'm very excited to watch them this season. I'm very happy they have the opening night game because that'll be a lot of fun to watch to see how they look.
Do you think that they're better suited for the playoffs with Randall, or do you think that they might have a higher regular season ceiling, but in the playoffs it could be? What do you think?
Yeah, it feels more regular season to me. Like the depth is awesome and stuff, and not that Towns was like a playoff superstar, but like we talked about on the trade episode, Randall's definitely had some playoff struggles. And I think when you're specifically game planned for every night, that will make some of Randall's deficiencies be highlighted a little more, especially the lack of shooting and things. So, and especially when teams are focused on Ant, they'll be very intentional, I would think, about helping off of Randall, making sure they pack the paint. So I think, like we always say, Ant's playmaking will be a big part of it. And I think he'll need to be ready to make kind of some advanced reads with how much help he'll be seeing in the paint with this condensed spacing. We can move on to a new tier. This will start with my number 5 team. I have about 4 teams in this tier. They're all kind of in different places. So I'm excited to hear what you guys think. So at number 5, I have the Phoenix Suns. Now, Phoenix, it was tough because it's like how many games are you getting from their star guys? But basically, how I kind of settled in on them at this spot was I like Budenholzer. I think Budenholzer is essentially just a better version of Frank Vogel. I think he'll have the defense right. He'll simplify the offense, emphasize the star players. And then Kevin Durant and Devin Booker are just very good. And as long as they can be out there for the majority of the games, I think the team will be very solid. And, the depth is still questionable, but I love the point guard pickups. Tyus Jones on the minimum. Like, I think that does a lot for this team. And even Monte Morris as a backup point guard. Like, that's such a huge improvement over what they had last year. And then they still have Grayson Allen. They have Royce O'Neal. The depth is the depth. But hopefully they can get enough from their big two plus Beal, hopefully can contribute a little more than last year. So, Lino, I'll throw it to you first on Phoenix. What are you looking for them, kind of compared to what you saw from last year when they won 49 games?
The Suns, man, they're going to be good this year, I feel like. I have never been higher. My stock has never been higher than it is today on Devin Booker. KD is obviously still KD, but Devin Booker showed me things in the Olympics that I just was not aware he had in him. Maybe I was always just watching the Suns with my hater glasses on and I was just too afraid to notice that he was this kind of player, but I think he's the guy and I think he can, and he's shown that obviously he's a part of what makes this team relevant season over season. And last season, if you guys were listening, the one thing I was screaming at the top of my lungs is they need point guards. Like, it doesn't really matter who, just get some people with the designation point guard on the roster. And they picked up 2 that are solid. I like Tyus Jones. I like Monte Morris. I mean, they don't move the needle per se in their respective position, but they move the needle way more than not having anybody on the roster in that position. And so I think that's going to make Devin Booker's life a little bit easier. I think it's going to make Kevin Durant's life a little easier. I think what you're asking Bradley Beal to do in the 32 games he might actually play, that becomes a lot easier. And this team can have an easier path to winning like 45 or 50 games. I don't know if they win 49. I think the teams around them just got better, but I'm not mad at them at this spot. I think I had them right at this spot as well. So that's not bad. But the Suns are going to have a decent season. I think Devin Booker's going to do all the great things he did this offseason, and I'm excited to see how it works out. Caelan, what are you thinking about the Suns?
Now, so funny. I actually had the Suns ranked fifth as well. I think they're gonna win more games. Last season, fifth was the Mavericks. They won 50 games. So I'll say these guys win about 50, 51 games. I mean, winning 49 games last year is super impressive considering everything that the team went through. I think Coach Budenholzer is better suited to coach this team. I don't think Frank Vogel's a bad coach. I don't think he did a bad job coaching this team. But I just think that Budenholzer is going to be better suited. Um, I do expect Bradley Beal to have a more normal season. I'll say that. I can't speak to, how close he can get to, the Bradley Beal that we once knew. But I think this season will at least be, he won't start the season, missing, 40 games or whatever it was that he missed last year. And so I think that'll be better for them. You guys mentioned the offseason pickups. That'll be helpful for them as well. So I think they'll just be like a more, kind of settled team. They had some kind of wild like win streaks and loss streaks last season. I think they'll just be more steady, less injuries, and they'll be pretty good all season long again.
Yeah, well said. I like that we all agreed on one. That makes me feel good. The only thing I'll say at the end, just a little caveat. Last season, Devin Booker played 68 games and Kevin Durant played 75 games. Both those numbers were a lot higher than I thought they were going to be when I went back and checked. So there is a chance if those guys aren't as available, it could get rough. But
KD
assuming
played
they're
75
close,
games.
it's crazy, right? I was shocked when I saw
I
that.
Him
don't
playing
remember that.
75 games and Paul George playing 72 games last season feels like a fever dream. Like,
Right.
that
Yeah,
didn't happen.
Lillard
No
played
way.
almost that much. There are a lot
AD,
of guys. I
AD
was
and
like,
LeBron played a bunch.
it was an interesting year last year. I guess whatever incentives they put out there really worked as far as playing guys. But anyway, hopefully the health continues because I think this team could be a lot of fun if they can stay healthy. So that's Phoenix, first one in this tier. Next one in this tier, we are looking at my number 6 Memphis Grizzlies. So the Grizz are an interesting team. Obviously, season from hell last year, just injuries on issues, and just all kind of stuff. So you kind of have to throw away last season's stats, and they won 27 games. Ja played 9, so you can throw all that out. But what I like about the Grizz, like we talked about a lot, continuity. They have Bane, Ja, and Triple J that are familiar with each other. Same with Brandon Clark. Like that unit plays well together. They defend well. Ja does his job, and the other ones are good defenders. Marcus Smart, if he can stay healthy, I think that fit makes sense. Zach Edey as like a weapon of destruction off the bench could be a lot of fun, just mashing second units. And
And
I think
starting.
Taylor Jenkins is a super good coach. So I think he'll get the most out of this group. So Lino, as our Edey truther in here, what are you thinking about the Memphis Grizzlies?
Dude, it's simple. This team's going to be awesome. It's actually uncanny. I didn't expect us to be so in line. I think the only thing that I've been, in opposition with you about is where the Nuggets are in this. I have them actually right above the Grizzlies, but I do have the Grizzlies here at 6. I do think they're going to have a much better season for all the reasons you mentioned. Desmond Bane's still an incredible player, and he won't have to do this all by himself anymore. Ja's coming back. I think the depth here is going to revitalize itself. Marcus Smart is going to be looking to have a better season. And then Zach Edey, man. Zach Edey's going to have a season upon seasons. This guy is as good as I said he was months ago. And I'm excited to see it happen. It'll be interesting to watch the fit and see how the ball moves around on this team that feels like it's kind of starting from scratch again. Like, I feel like it's been so long at this point that even though some of these guys have been on the roster for 3-4 years now, it does feel like a whole like this roster hasn't played together very much in that total time. And so we'll see how that all works together and how long it takes them to put it together. But I do think they obviously have a much better season, and record wise, wins wise, I think they really just swap places with the Clippers as far as regular season wins go. Like I think they're just going to, the Clippers are going to be much worse, and then the Grizzlies are going to win all those games. And so they should be in the hunt there above everybody else. I just think they're slightly more talented than the rest of the teams we're going to talk about. So I'm pretty excited for them. But Caelan, what are your thoughts on the Grizzlies?
I had this team finishing sixth as well. I
Wow.
think that I think that the Grizz mind melt there. I think the Grizz Lino, you said it. I think they do feel pretty different, oddly enough, than from when they were, like the 2 seed or whatever it was. The team just has a completely, I don't know, kind of a different vibe to it. No more Dylan Brooks, and just went through a whole season pretty much without Ja on the team, and they were, I guess, supposed to be like trying to kind of do a little image cleanup in the first place. So I am interested to see them try to recapture some of that winning culture that they had. So I guess I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up, kind of returning to that level of form and just being a really good regular season team. They do have that capability. Ja Morant is a complete dynamo. He is, impossible to guard. I'm wondering where his shot is after a injury to his shoulder. He was never the best shooter, and it was something that he was definitely working on. So he's missed a lot of time. I'm wondering where that is at this point. I think that's going to make a big difference at how far this team can go in the playoffs. I know we're talking like regular season stuff, but um, so I think that's going to be an important thing to kind of figure out, and just interested to see because a lot of these young guys. I'm wondering if Jaren Jackson Jr. can kind of return to that defensive player of the year status. He's got Edie beside him now, another big body. That's what he had, when he was playing next to Steven Adams. So that's what he's most comfortable with. So he should be better this season. But yeah, I do have them winning obviously more games because they had a crazy season last year. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody that had good injury luck transferred all their bad injury luck to Memphis. It feels like it seems like their whole roster got hurt. And speaking of it, it has kind of already started this season. Gigi Jackson, I believe it was a foot fracture he got diagnosed with. He's an important bench piece for him. He's going to be out 2 months, at least 2 more months. And then Vince Williams Jr., I forget his injury. It was a stress reaction, I think, in his leg, and he's got at least 2 more weeks till he'll be reevaluated. So it's really the only reason I didn't put them higher because I like those depth pieces, and there's gonna be a lot of Luke Kennard minutes early on. So everyone, just brace yourselves for that.
I never know what is a stress reaction. What is that? I have no idea what that is.
I assume it's similar to a stress fracture, but it's definitely out of my scope of
Like
knowledge.
I like hear those things. I'm like, what is that? I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like something in like 3 or 4 weeks would be fixed and you could be reevaluated, but we'll see. Hopefully, Vince Williams Jr. could pull through because it's a fun player for sure. We can get on to my next one, and we have, let's see, number 7. Okay, so these next two, I flip flopped a lot, so keep that in mind. But number 7, I went with the Sacramento Kings. So Sacramento
Wow.
last year, 46 and 36, 14th in offense, 18th in defense. Pretty rough season from Sacramento all around. But I think there's some things to be excited about. I think Keon Ellis kind of breaking out last year and establishing himself as a starter on this team is important. They need that defense. The DeRozan acquisition, I think DeMar's become a very adaptable player. I think he'll be able to fit into this offensive ecosystem really well. And then Keegan Murray kind of had a down shooting year. That's the skill I trust the most in him. So expect a bounce back year from him. And I think there's some things to be excited about. So 7, right in that play-in range, kind of felt like a good spot for me for the Kings. Lino, what are you thinking about Sacramento?
I don't have many thoughts about Sacramento, honestly. That's a bit higher than I had them going into this season. I just don't think they improved at the rate that the other teams did, and I've already kind of compensated for the teams that are going to fall out. I just don't think they break the mold there. And I know you mentioned they finished ninth last season, which, where I have them is maybe like slightly, I think I have them at eighth actually. So not terribly far off, but ultimately, I don't think they win more games. I think they probably win 46, 47 games, and that just still gets them into like an eighth seed position just because of the teams that are going to drop off a little bit there. And so we'll see what happens. I don't know that DeMar DeRozan really moves the needle for me for this team. I don't know exactly what he answers for their questions. And I just think the league around them just improved in a way that they didn't. And I don't know. I just have so many things I don't know about the Kings as far as going into this season, and nothing that I feel terribly confident about. So I have them at this position just based on the year that they had, but I don't necessarily see them playing a better brand of basketball moving forward. Caelan, what are your thoughts on the Kings?
I had the Kings at 7 as well. I was kind of flip flopping them around. I think they'll win probably more games just off the strength of swapping out Harrison Barnes for DeMar DeRozan. And DeMar DeRozan's a better player. I think people kind of, well, I don't know. Maybe it just depends on your opinion, but sometimes I think people underrate De'Aaron Fox. I think De'Aaron Fox is a really good player. I think he's better than people think that he is.
Mm-hmm.
He's like he's just really tough to guard. I would really kind of put him close to that kind of impossible to guard category because he is so fast. He plays very well off of Domantas Sabonis, who I think is going to have another dominant season on the boards, and it's just a very consistent, steady player. So I would expect good things from them. I thought they had got off to a really good start last season, and then I think De'Aaron Fox went down. He missed like a week or two with an injury, and it kind of derailed them a little bit. But I think that if they can have a healthy start, I think they can surprise some people at the beginning, and win some early games. They'll probably fall back to earth at some point, but I think they can have a really strong start. This is a good team, and I think they have a good coach and Mike Brown. So yeah, I had them. I had them at 7th as well, and I was trying to move them around a little bit, but I think they're gonna be about right here.
Nice. Well, that brings me to the team I consistently flip flopped with the Kings. And at number 8, I have the ultimate mystery box, which is the New Orleans Pelicans.
Oh, you're crazy. Oh, you're crazy for this. You're
This
crazy.
team is
Wow.
so strange. They had a good season last year. I feel like New Orleans is always like 10% better than you think they were. They were had 49 wins, or almost a 50-win team, 13th in offense. They had another top 10 defense. They were number 8 in defense. And this summer, they decided to trade for DeJounte Murray and just not really sign a starting center. What we've heard most recently is it sounds like they're going to go with like a Zion at 5 kind of lineup. So I'm projecting that the starters are going to be DeJounte, CJ, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, and Zion, which that feels very shaky in the Western Conference. I think offensively it could be pretty potent, but definitely going to be worried defensively. Daniel Tice is really the only like established veteran center on the roster. So, maybe we're just a few, hours away from a Brandon Ingram trade that brings them a solid center, but evaluating the team as they are right now, that's definitely something I'm a little concerned with. But I love the depth. Trey Jones off the bench is awesome. Jose Alvarado Trey Murphy the third off the bench is awesome. Jose Alvarado is a good backup point guard. I like Jordan Hawkins a lot. I think he's going to bring them some much needed volume shooting. Ultimately, I think they need to move either CJ or Brandon Ingram to the bench for Trey Murphy the third, but I think that's something that'll happen kind of later in the season. So we'll see what happens. But apparently, this is my first very controversial one. So I'm excited to hear from you guys. Caelan, where do you have the Pelicans? Just to reiterate, 49 wins last year. So what are you thinking of them this year?
Uh, I had the Pelicans 11th. I don't think they're going to even make the play in. I just this team's weird. Like this is not this is not gonna work. This is a weird team. Like you said, they don't really have like a traditional center to start. Um, and I just think that the DeJounte Murray addition is strange. I'm not even sure if they initially intended to even go into the season like this. I feel like they wanted to move Ingram, and they just was not the right trade available, and I don't think there will be unless he has a strong start to this season, and then you can move him at the deadline. But I think the book is out on Ingram because he's just been in the league long enough. You kind of know what he is, um, and I just think people don't want him as like a lead ball handler type person, and that's kind of what his game is. So I don't know how all that's going to fit. They have like 15 dudes that want to dribble the ball on this team. Like
Dude.
what? I just no way they're gonna. What is it? The 8th spot? No way. Maybe they'll be the 9 or 10 seed, but I had them at 11th. I don't think they're gonna be very good, and I think that if guys start falling, getting injured, mainly Zion. I think if Zion gets injured, that'll be really tough for this team to overcome. But I just think that if things don't go well, then this is not the type of team to me that's gonna like come together and like stick it out. Like I don't see that for them. So, what do you think, Lane?
I'm on the same boat as Caelan. I had them 10th in my order of things, and I just can't sign on to this. This makes no sense. They, like you guys mentioned, they have four primary ball handlers starting for this team. And once those four players come off the floor, you got Carlo Matkovic playing power forward and Jose Alvarado leading your team. And you're going to get a bunch of Jamal Cain minutes for some reason. Like I don't get this team. And maybe I'm not smart enough to get this team. Maybe the front office and coaching staff at the New Orleans Pelicans facility just knows more ball than I do. But from my history of watching basketball, I feel like you need to have a starting center that's not Daniel Tice or Trey Jemison, whoever that is. Like these names I've just never heard of, and they just don't have anybody that you can confidently say will play the center position besides your starting power forward, who is probably the best talent on your team. Now, maybe this team is still just trying to make things happen and they haven't yet, and there's still going to be some more moves. I think we all expected Brandon Ingram or CJ McCollum to be moved by now, and it's not to say that that can't happen yet. Who knows? Maybe they were in the Julius Randle sweepstakes and it just never came together. And maybe now Minnesota will move Randall at the deadline or something and they can line up some. That'd be interesting, but as it currently stands, this is not a winning basketball team. And so I will be
Mhm.
very surprised, pleasantly surprised as always. Like usually when I'm wrong, it's about teams being better than I thought they were, and that's always awesome. But I just don't see it with this team right now. Micah, you know, what do you feel like is the path to them making it to the eighth seed? Is it just being better than the worst teams right now, or
Yeah, I mean,
where's the
I think they can be decent. I think the offense will be good. I think they'll have a
yeah?
good offense, probably 12 to 8 kind of range. The defense, it'll be tough. They'll have to switch more. It's another reason I'd really like to see more Trey Murphy the third. Not that he's a stellar defender, but he's going to be better than the guys they're throwing out there. I hope DeJounte can gain a little bit more of his defensive intensity. Sometimes that happens when you go from a bad situation back to a good one. But yeah, it's not something where like I said, I had them bottom of this tier, so I do think there's some upside built in. But I like the talent, I like the depth, and it's funky right now. But it's something I could see in a few weeks. Everyone being it's probably going to go one or two ways. People are going to be like, obviously you should have had a center, or they're going to be like, oh, Zion, he's really beating up the other team's center off the bounce. Like this is hard for people to guard. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm surprised. This isn't one I thought was super controversial at this spot. So I'm glad we had
Wow.
some disagreement. All right, next up, number 9, we have the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers are going to be an interesting one to talk about because roster wise, not a lot of changes, right? It's going to be a pretty similar team that you saw to last year. What's interesting is the biggest change is the head coach, and it's a rookie head coach. It's going to be hard to project how things are going to look with JJ Redick manning the steering wheel in this team, but I do like everything people are saying right now. It seems like all the players are excited about it. He's staying, good stuff in interviews as far as their shot profile and what he wants from the team. So I think we could see a significant jump just from that. Last year, the Lakers were the 7 seed, 47 wins. So I'll be interested to see how it works out. And not to, it's not really worth discussing because we can't control it, but health is going to be the thing. Like we talked about, LeBron and AD were kind of outliers last year in terms of games played. I have it just the last 4 seasons. Anthony Davis played 36 games, 46 games, 56 games, and then 76 games last season. LeBron 45, 56, 55, 71. One of those is a shortened season, so something to keep in mind. But it was something that stood out to me that I feel like those two guys are so important for this team. If there's any more missed time, it could get a little rough. Caelan, these are your guys. What are you thinking about the Lakers this year?
I don't think the Lakers are very good, honestly. I definitely been over this. Like I've been back and forth, but yeah, the team is just not very good in my opinion. Um, I think when I first did my little seedings, I think I had them at 10th. But I think they're definitely a play-in team. They could go as high as 7th if they have like a great season, but I just don't see it. I think that the starting lineup is like just amazingly slow-footed. Like it's hard to even like construct a team this slow. Like LeBron is only fast in the occasional burst, but outside of that, he's a pretty slow-footed player. AD is he's a mobile big, but at the same time, he's kind of slow, like in a lot of instances. And then D'Lo and Austin Reeves both lack athleticism. Rui is not, he's an athlete, but he struggles like getting around screens and like that type of movement. So the team is really slow, and I think that the JJ Redick thing. I think almost the pendulum has almost swung too far on Darvin Ham to where like he's like all the jokes and stuff. Like he wasn't a laughing stock bad. He did do some good things that I think he's not getting credit for, and I think JJ Redick is gonna do better at the things that Darvin Ham did poorly. Yes. And that is why he got hired. But that doesn't mean he's going to do everything better than Darvin Ham. I think there's going to be some things to figure out at the start of the season. I think they're gonna struggle. I think they're gonna have some bad defensive games because one, they lack the personnel to guard effectively. I mean, almost nobody on this team really can play defense outside of AD, and the other guy who can, Jared Vanderbilt, is somehow hurt after missing all of last season. He's still hurt. I don't understand how, young man. So I don't think Gabe Vincent is like what we had hoped he was, and maybe our hopes were just not fair in the first place, and they probably weren't. But he's just not that player. I think he's going to be okay at best, but there's a chance that if he's not like really solid defensively, you almost rather just play Dalton Connect. Like he's going to give you better offense. He's a more reliable shooter. He's a bigger player. Austin Reeves, he wasn't terrible. Like he had like tough assignments all season last year. That's what he was tasked with doing. But he's definitely going to compete. And Gabe Vincent isn't that much better than Austin Reeves, I think, defensively. So if his shot isn't going to fall, then just it's going to be tough to play Gabe Vincent, in my opinion. I almost rather just work on developing some of the younger guys, maybe put Hood Schifino out there, see what he can do. He's got great size. I want to see if he can play. But I don't think this team's going to win a lot of games. I think they'll win less than they did last year.
Man, I didn't know I'd have to be the one to come in here and do this, but fine, I'll take over. I think the Lakers are going to be solid. Now, great, probably not, but I don't think they're going to be bad. I think the problem is the language around how we look at seeding in the playoffs now is that when you're a 7th seed, you're in the play-in tournament. When in reality, the 7th seed is what a lot of teams are fighting for to make it to the playoffs. And now it's just, you got to keep fighting from that position. But I think the Lakers are going to be pretty solid. I think the main thing I'm looking at is not super statistical or very advanced in philosophy by any means, but I do think LeBron and AD looked absolutely undefeatable in the playoffs, and I think they carry that in, or in the Olympics, and I think they carry that into this next season. I think they're going to be really, really good. I think AD is going to have an incredible season. I really am optimistic about the JJ Redick signing and his coaching. I think the offense is going to look at least interesting moving forward, and I think he's going to have a lot of effort. I think honestly, Austin or JJ Redick is not a guy that really gives me good vibes as far as like players coach stuff. I think players probably get along with him because he's a player, but when I listen to him talk, I'm like, I personally don't know if I could sit in a room and really enjoy this person's company,
Yeah, he's kind of an
but
ass.
he's kind of a dickhead. But
Yeah.
it does seem like he really is honed in on the offensive end, and even seeing some of the sets we've seen in the preseason, like I'm intrigued in how that's going to look and how he's going to employ or deploy these players moving forward. I think players like Gabe Vincent are going to come around. I think last season was it was a fall off, and I know you guys also had the Kendrick Nunn experience, but it was
Oh
a
my
Miami
god.
Heat role player fall off beyond what I've ever seen before in a way that seemed not the same as what happened with Kendrick Nunn, especially given that Gabe only played 11 games. Um, I think that he'll come back and play a normal season and be a contributor as a role player. I think that will help. I think you guys drafted shooting, which was important. Dalton Connect will probably get more minutes than he needs to get this season, but he'll probably play a small role out there. I just feel good about it though. Like I think this season could be a season that really works out for them. Jalen Hood Schifino is a guy I really liked in the draft, and obviously didn't get a lot of opportunity and had some health stuff going on last year. But I like what he could possibly be for y'all moving forward, and I think the core of this team is still pretty solid. And again, I think AD is just one of the probably top two, top three best players in the West right now,
Yeah,
and that
he's gonna
matters.
get his
I was like,
numbers and he's gonna be all NBA, and so will LeBron. But I mean,
I think they're gonna win though. Like I
you
think
like
those
Christian
guys
Wood?
can do
Like, do you
that.
really like Christian Wood? Like, I
I mean,
mean,
the guys above them, there's not. I mean, there's Nikola Jokic, and then
Jackson
who's
Hayes
Christian
is
Wood
gonna get real
facing
minutes
against?
on this team. Because
Hey, Christian Coloco is a
Christian
seven
Wood
foot
has
one guy.
surgery,
You
so
guys can give a shot there.
no Christian. No, oh
Um,
my goodness, no.
All right,
Arizona
Lito's
University's
resorted to
finest.
just reading down the roster. We're moving on.
Hey, I like Coloco. We almost drafted him. He got a lot of workouts in Miami. But truly, like I think if you can believe in the best players in some of these top teams, obviously it's enough to take them to the 1 and 2 seed. Like Luka's obviously great. Jokic is obviously great. And they've got a little bit more talent. Luka has a lot more talent. I honestly don't think Denver has that much more talent. Like I think
Mm.
it's just going to
No,
be with Jamal Murray not being the player that I think he is. I think it's going to be Jokic on an island moving into that season. And at least AD has LeBron and LeBron has AD. And I think those guys are incredible. And I think they can, for a 7 seed team, like I'm not saying they're going to be a 3 seed, but I have them higher than where you guys have them right now. Obviously, it's still a play in because 7 through 10, which is a crazy gap, um, gets to make it to the play-in. But I think we are discrediting the Lakers just a touch, given what they've been able to accomplish over the past 4 years.
Well, one thing's for sure, we will have plenty of Lakers talk on this show, so it'll be
oh
fun to
god.
see how how it shakes out. Number 10, I have the Houston Rockets. We're going pretty long, so we'll kind of just do quick hitters throughout the rest of these. But Houston, they're 20th in offense last year, but they were pretty good as far as location effective field goal percentage, meaning they're taking the right shots. I think their young talent develops. They still have good veterans around them. So Houston, I feel like can improve and get into the play-in. So that's kind of where I have Houston at this spot. Caelan, do you have any Rockets thoughts? Anything you'll be looking for from them?
The Rockets should be better than last season. They should be pretty good. I like where this team's headed. I like that they are kind of sneaky deep with young guys and young talent. And I think Reed Shepard, I think he's going to be sort of a difference maker for this team. Like he's really good, man. I think Reed Shepard's really good. I think Jalen Green's my guy, Jalen Green. I think he's going to show you guys that he knows how to play basketball. Micah, who famously said he's not good at anything. What is he good at? That's going to be a meme at some point, trust me. Uh, what do you think about the Rockets, Lee?
I think they're going to be very interesting. I have them around here. I think I have them 11th right now. They could probably be in the play-in. I genuinely think it's going to be dependent on, are they giving the keys to the young guys, or are they going to stick with leaning on their veterans? And I'm not exactly sure which one leads in which direction. Like, I don't know if leaning on the young guys actually loses them more games or wins them more games, but I think they are at kind of an impasse. They're not at an impasse where they have to decide now. They kind of kick the ball down the road, but they've got a lot of talent on this team in a lot of different ways. I'm obviously not super high on Jalen Green either, but in the role he's currently in, it's not that bad. I don't know if I give that guy the keys to this roster, but we'll see what happens. And they had a really strong finish at the end of the season to finish out 41-41. And so I think they can improve upon where they left off last season and be pretty solid, especially given some of the teams that have fallen off and will continue to be a little worse moving forward.
Real
Next
quick,
up,
I
yeah,
just
go
want to
for it.
say, I think the Rockets should get rid of Fred Van Vliet. I don't like that guy at all. Now you have Amen Thompson. Like, let Amen Thompson play. Give him the ball. You got Reed Shepard back there, Jalen Green. Like you have a lot of guys that can handle the ball. And Fred Van Vliet, he's just an overrated player for me. So I really
Yeah,
hope
and that
they
was
get
my
rid of
main
him.
thing too. Is like, are they gonna let Fred Van Vliet play 40 minutes a game? Or are they going to
I hope
actually just
not,
let
bro.
these young guys get the
He's
minutes
not
that they
good.
need to develop?
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. Next up at 11, I have the Golden State Warriors. Every time I start to like do research and stuff for the Warriors, I guess it's like growing up in the like Warriors Cavs finals era. I'm just like, oh, gotta talk about the Warriors, I guess. Steph slipped a little bit last year. I think he'll probably slip a little bit more this year. There's not a lot of offensive talent on this team outside of him. Losing Klay Thompson will probably help ultimately. I didn't hate their offseason. D'Anthony Melton, Kyle Anderson, solid role players. They could end up like in the top of this tier. They could be like the 8th or 9th seed potentially if things really go right. But yeah, it seems like kind of just the same thing with Golden State. Maybe Kuminga has a breakthrough. Other than that, hard to see a ton of upside. Do either of you guys have any strong takes on the Warriors this year?
This will be very much all eyes, I think, will be on Steve Kerr going into this season, because his basketball philosophies and the structure of his offense is gonna have to be very different. I think it needed to be different over the past few years as Klay Thompson fell off of a cliff, shooting wise, and I don't know if they ever really adjusted to that. And now that he's just gone and they didn't replace him with some, I mean, Buddy Hield's there, and we'll see if Buddy Hield can do the same thing that Hall of Fame Klay Thompson was able to do before. But I'm thinking that this team just needs to operate very differently than it ever has before if they're going to have a chance at revitalizing. And my guess is that they won't. So I also have them pretty low on my scale, and I don't think they win 46 games next year.
Yeah, I think the Warriors, I think they may even finish 41-41 because they are mid. This is a mid basketball
Mhm.
team. And I think that even though I'm not high on Klay Thompson, like the more guys you remove from like that Golden State championship structure, like the more culture you lose, and like the more people have to learn this kind of weird system that is not run pretty much anywhere else in the league. So that's always tough, trying to find which guys fit in that system and who's going to play well. It's almost hard to even be sure until they get in the system. So yeah, I think they definitely take a step back this year.
Nice. All right. Next up, number 12, a team, probably the last interesting team, is the San Antonio Spurs for me. Had a solid offseason, brought in some veteran guys to help Wimby along. Chris Paul, I think always helps younger teams. I don't think it'll be to the degree he helped Oklahoma City, but I do think he'll kind of get the offense organized. And now you'll at least have 48 minutes of competent point guard play with him and Trey Jones manning that spot for this team. So, obviously, Wimby's the big draw here. So, Lino, what are you looking for from San Antonio? How do you kind of project this season to go for them?
I have the Spurs as a 9 seed going into this
Oh
next
my
season.
goodness.
All right.
I think Wimby's going to be amazing. I think Chris Paul's a great addition. I like the Spurs. What can I say? I got nothing else for you, but just
Fair.
keep an eye on them. They're going to win more games. They're incentivized to win more games. They don't need to lose more games. They have other people's picks, and they want to get this ball rolling as fast as possible. I can't remember how long it really took for the Mavs to start winning games after they drafted Luca, or how long it took for the Cavs to win more games after they drafted LeBron. But it's going to be something like that. Like, if we're thinking they're going to slow roll the Wemby rollout here, and I think we're terribly misguided. I think they're ready to get going as fast as possible. Now, are they going to win 50 games? No. Can this team win somewhere between 39 and 45? Yeah, we'll see.
This team is quite literally just as terrible as they were last year. Like, they're just as bad. Plus Chris Paul, I guess, who's going to play like 45 games. So that's worth what, 2 extra wins. I mean, they're bad. Like, they're like it's the same team. They're terrible. I don't know what to say about this team. They added Harrison Barnes. Like, he stinks. Like, this team's not good.
I like Harrison Barnes. I feel like he's
He's
a
not
regular
a,
season game winner.
he. I used to like Harrison Barnes, but yeah. This is a
Yeah.
bad basketball team, Micah.
Yeah, I think they'll be better. I mean, no more points Sohan, stuff like that. They'll be better. I just don't think they'll be super good. My question though, I just like we don't have enough time to get too into this. Wemby needs to start playing a little more real basketball and offense, in my opinion. I know he can do everything, and that's probably like overwhelming for him right now. I need him to play a little bit more traditional center basketball. He just takes way too many jump shots, in my opinion. I think he could be such a devastating player around the basket, and he just doesn't do it enough. And I think Chris Paul will help him get in those spots. But I looked it up, so let me see if I can find it. So only 37% of Wemby's shots last year came at the rim. It's like, how is like half of your shots not at the rim? And then what's also concerning is let's see, 41% of his shots were either long mid-range shots or threes. 40% of his shots were long jumpers.
Yeah.
That's you can't like down the
Hey,
road.
he's a 3-level score. What can I say?
He shot 33% on those shots. It was bad, and he'll get better. Like, he's going to be good, but we're like, people are getting so like, people are calling him like a top 10 player and stuff. It's like the offense actually has to work first. Like, the defense, yes, he could win. He'll be top 3 in DPOY going forward. But the offense, like, it needs to start looking like real basketball. Like, I know he's like filling out the studio space, but I need him to start playing a little more traditionally. Like, the jumpers and stuff will be cool down the road. Right now, screening, diving, posting up smaller guys. You have point guards now that'll get you the ball. You gotta do those things. So that's my little Wemby rant. I think he'll be great, but I do need him to start being a little more serious.
Great points. Great points.
And the
Wow.
Heat just
Victor
played him last night.
Wembanyama, unserious basketball player. Duly noted for syndication.
The Heat played him last night, and his first shot was a pull-up 3 in transition. And I was like, dude, what?
So was Bam's.
Well, first of all, Bam's was a corner 3 off a hammer screen, and he made it. So let's just say that. And again, Bam has worked to that. This is year 7, and year 7 or 8, whatever it is, Wemby can start doing that stuff. But right now, we just got to be a regular big. We got to do that stuff. So, okay, guys, we can wrap up. We have Clippers, Jazz, Blazers. Weird little group right here. Kawhi, Young Masuk of ESPN said Kawhi's probably not going to be ready for the season opener. The Jazz are probably going to tank. The Blazers definitely going to tank. Clippers, Jazz, Blazers. Caelan, I'll throw it to you first. What's the most interesting thing out of this little trifecta for you?
Man, I felt like there was definitely somebody in Clippers camp that was confident in this season. This was after the Paul George going. It might have been like Derek Jones Jr. or somebody was like, it's about to be no, this team is going to be very bad. The James Harden show once again. That's going to be fun.
We're back, baby.
And then the other two teams incentivized to lose the Jazz. Their pick is what, just like top 10 protected or something. So they definitely want to be in the top 10. So they're going to lose games, and the Blazers are the Blazers.
Yeah. I knew it was wraps for the Clippers when Kawhi had that post-practice interview where they were asking about his new teammates, and he was like, "Yeah, nobody really stands out to me at all." And that was like it. That's all he had to say. He like named them and then was like, "I have nothing positive to say about any of these guys." So I was like, "Yeah, this team is done." But
Oh
those three teams
man.
are going to be bad, and they're probably not worth any more minutes. So shout out to those fans. Wishing you guys the best of luck, and hope you guys get to win the Cooper Flag sweepstakes.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah.
fun.
Well
That's really
said.
fun.
Well said. All
That's
right.
fun.
Well, that's the Western Conference, folks. It's going to be a bloodbath, and we're all very excited to watch it. The next time you hear from us, there will probably be real games happening, which is very exciting. We're just a few short days away from opening night. So, to conclude the offseason, we appreciate everyone for listening through the offseason. We know that's when the real sickos are out crushing podcasts. So, we appreciate you guys. As always, check us out on all our social media. Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. If you have questions, comments, email us confidenceirrational@gmail.com. For myself, Micah, my fellow hosts and friends, Lino and Caelan, we appreciate you all for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy opening night.